Late last month, a Goldman Sachs report shocked personal finance circles with one headline: many high earners are still living paycheck to paycheck. It found that about 40% of people making over $500,000 a year feel trapped in the same cycle.
Even more surprisingly, fewer than a third said they consistently make progress on long-term goals like debt payoff or retirement savings.
Yes. And yes, it's hard to feel too sympathetic for someone earning 10 times the median income.
The internet certainly didn't respond with much sympathy. But behind the jokes, this reveals something important about how the economy and our relationship with money has changed.
For most of modern history, rich people going broke was an exception, not the rule.
When it happened, it usually involved athletes, celebrities, or lottery winners. Big money arriving fast, then disappearing faster.
Financial professionals used to agree that beyond a certain income, you could brute force your way through plenty of bad decisions.
But today, that safety cushion has thinned, and high earners are struggling far more often than you'd expect.
If the data is right, either rich people got much worse with money, or industries got much better at taking it from them.
Because once you're inside a high-income world, the cost of what felt normal starts rising fast.
One of the funniest developments of the last decade is rising inequality among the top 1%.
There may be tens of millions of millionaires, yet a small slice at the very top holds a huge share of their collective wealth, which creates a strange psychological outcome. Nobody feels poorer every day than people who are already rich.
Most of us compare ourselves to people who live in the same world we do, because we mostly interact with people like us.
Our neighborhoods, workplaces, relationships, and friendships tend to cluster by socioeconomic status.
But within most social circles, inequality feels limited. A few upgrades, but the same basic life.
But as you move to the very top, the gaps explode, and comparison becomes far more damaging.
A $500,000 salary is rich until you're working next to someone making 20 times more.
Nowhere else on the income ladder do people work directly alongside others earning 20 times more than they do. Inside the top 1%, income differences aren't gradual, they're exponential.
As people move higher, their reference group shifts upward, constantly redefining what normal looks like. Expenses that would be absurd to most people begin to feel like professional necessities.
This creates a cycle where higher income leads to higher expectations, not financial freedom. Debt becomes normalized, not as desperation, but as a tool to maintain status.
As a result, anxiety doesn't disappear with wealth. It often intensifies.
The benchmark stops being comfort and becomes comparison. This is why people earning less, but still high incomes, often perform better financially. They're still exposed to the real economy, where spending has limits.
Economists call this pattern socioeconomic fractality.
It was first observed over a century ago by Vilfredo Pareto while studying income distributions. But recent global wealth booms have dramatically intensified this effect.
Which leads to absurd situations where millionaires feel squeezed by billionaires.
And increasingly, we see wealthy people openly expressing financial frustration.
It's easy to laugh, but there's something more serious underneath. Rising costs aren't random. They're structural and compounding. Entire industries now exist to efficiently extract money from people at the top.
And unlike the past, many of these costs never end. They recur every month, every year.
So even with enormous income, flexibility quietly disappears.
For high earners today, money rarely disappears through big mistakes, but through thousands of small, normalized drains. Most of the damage happens automatically, quietly, and without conscious decision-making.
As income grows, so does the baseline cost of simply maintaining one's perceived position. Stepping down feels risky, not just socially, but professionally. Housing alone can lock even very high earners into fragile financial positions. Education, healthcare, and family costs compound the pressure year after year.
Credit makes these lifestyles possible, but also far harder to escape.
On paper, wealth may look impressive, but usable cash often remains scarce.
When income is disrupted, the fragility becomes immediately visible.
At high income levels, small disruptions can trigger outsized consequences.
The modern economy is exceptionally efficient at monetizing aspiration. Status increasingly substitutes for stability.
Even perfect budgeting struggles against structural forces.
This isn't just a story about rich people making bad choices.
It's a warning about how pressure travels through the entire economy.
Because income alone no longer guarantees financial freedom.
True security comes from flexibility, not magnitude. And flexibility depends on how much of your life is already spoken for.
The top 1% aren't failing because they lack money.
They're failing because the system extracts relentlessly, especially from those who can afford it.
And once you see that, the problem stops looking personal. It becomes a question of structure, incentives, and design.
That's how the top 1% learn to bankrupt themselves, and why it matters to everyone else.